The Riverside County Fair was in its final weekend when 16-year-old Jessica Martinez walked through the entrance gates on the evening of October 15th, 1995. The fairgrounds in Indio, California, blazed with neon lights, cutting through the desert darkness, carnival music mixing with the excited screams from the tilt-a-whirl and the barkers calling out from game booths. Jessica had been looking forward to this night for weeks, her first time at the fair without parental supervision, armed with $40 in babysitting money and the independence that came with having her driver's license for exactly 3 months. Jessica was a responsible teenager, the kind of girl who never missed curfew and always called when her plans changed. She was a junior at Indio High School, where she maintained a 3.8 GPA while working part-time at a local daycare center. Her parents, Maria and Roberto Martinez, had been reluctant to let her attend the fair alone, but Jessica's track record of responsibility and her promise to meet friends there had finally convinced them. "Home by 11, Maria had called out as Jessica backed their blue Honda Civic out of the driveway. "And call if you're going to be even 5 minutes late." "I will, Mom," Jessica had promised, rolling her eyes good-naturedly at her mother's familiar caution. It was the last conversation they would ever have. Jessica met her best friend Sarah Chen at the fair entrance at 7:30 p.m., along with 2 other girls from their biology class. The group spent the evening riding rides, playing games, and sharing funnel cake, documenting their adventure with a disposable camera that Sarah had brought. The photos, developed later by investigators, showed Jessica laughing on the Ferris wheel, concentrating intensely as she tried to win a stuffed animal at the ring toss, sharing cotton candy with her friends as they walked past the livestock exhibits. At approximately 9:45 p.m., Jessica told her friends she was going to use the restroom before they left the fairgrounds. The bathroom facilities were located near the center of the fair, between the food vendors and the midway games. Sarah offered to accompany her, but Jessica waved her off, saying she would meet them at the entrance gates in 10 minutes for the drive home. Jessica never arrived at the meeting point. Sarah waited until 10:15 p.m. before beginning to search the fairgrounds, assuming her friend had gotten distracted by a game or ride. When 30 minutes passed with no sign of Jessica, Sarah and the other girls contacted fair security, then called Jessica's parents from a payphone near the entrance. Roberto Martinez arrived at the fairgrounds within 20 minutes, his initial annoyance at Jessica's apparent irresponsibility quickly giving way to genuine concern. Jessica was never late without calling, never failed to meet her friends when promised. By 11:30 p.m., when fair security had conducted a thorough search of the grounds, the Riverside County Sheriff's Department was called. Detective Ray Collins, a 15-year veteran of the department, took charge of the investigation on October 16th. The fairgrounds presented unique challenges for a missing person case. Hundreds of people had been on the property the night before, most of them strangers passing through the area, many paying cash for admission and leaving no record of their presence. The restroom where Jessica was last seen was located in a high-traffic area with multiple exit routes. Security cameras in 1995 were limited and of poor quality, but footage from the entrance gates showed Jessica arriving with her friends and never showed her leaving. Fair employees working near the restroom area remembered seeing teenage girls throughout the evening, but couldn't specifically identify Jessica or recall anything unusual. The initial investigation focused on fair employees and carnival workers, a transient population with varying backgrounds and levels of documentation. The traveling carnival that provided most of the rides and games employed dozens of workers who moved from town to town, often with limited background checks and sometimes using aliases. Detective Collins questioned every employee who had been working near the central restroom area on October 15th. Most were cooperative, providing alibis and submitting to voluntary interviews, but several had criminal backgrounds involving theft, assault, and in 2 cases, charges related to minors that had been dismissed or reduced in plea bargains. Marcus Whelan, a 34-year-old ride operator with convictions for burglary and assault, became the primary suspect when background checks revealed he had been questioned in connection with 2 other disappearances of teenage girls in Arizona and Nevada over the previous 3 years. In both cases, the girls had vanished from locations where Whelan's carnival was operating, though no charges had ever been filed due to lack of evidence. Whelan was arrested on October 18th, when his story about his whereabouts on the night of Jessica's disappearance proved inconsistent. He claimed to have been operating the tilt-a-whirl continuously from 8 p.m. until the fair closed at midnight. But other employees couldn't confirm his presence during a crucial period between 9:30 and 10:30 p.m. when rides were briefly shut down for a safety inspection. The case against Whelan strengthened when searchers found Jessica's purse in a dumpster behind the carnival's equipment staging area, approximately 200 yards from the restroom where she was last seen. The purse contained her driver's license, the remaining money from her evening at the fair, and the disposable camera with photos from her night with friends. Her car keys were missing. Jessica's Honda Civic was discovered 2 days later in the parking lot of a truck stop 15 miles east of the fairgrounds, unlocked with the keys on the driver's seat. The location suggested someone familiar with the area's geography and possibly the routes used by long-haul truckers passing through Southern California's desert regions. But despite the circumstantial evidence, prosecutors struggled to build a solid case against Marcus Whelan. His fingerprints weren't found on Jessica's purse or car, and no witnesses could place them together at any point during the evening. The timeline of the alleged abduction remained problematic. The period when Whelan couldn't account for his whereabouts was barely an hour, hardly enough time to kidnap Jessica, dispose of her purse, move her car to the truck stop, and return to work without being noticed. More damaging to the prosecution was testimony from other carnival employees who insisted that Whelan, while certainly unpleasant and possibly dangerous, was also remarkably lazy and risk-averse. Several co-workers described him as someone who avoided confrontation and preferred petty theft to crimes that might involve violence or extended prison sentences. Marcus was a creep, but he wasn't smart enough to pull off something like this, testified Linda Garrett, a ticket booth operator who had worked with Whelan for 2 seasons. He could barely figure out how to operate the ride machinery. The idea that he planned and executed a kidnapping without leaving evidence doesn't match the guy I knew. The charges against Whelan were dropped in January 1996, though he remained a person of interest in Jessica's disappearance. The carnival company terminated his employment and banned him from their properties, citing the negative publicity surrounding the case. Whelan left California and was arrested 6 months later in Texas on unrelated burglary charges that resulted in a 3-year prison sentence. With the primary suspect eliminated, Detective Collins expanded the investigation to include registered sex offenders in the region and possible connections to other missing person cases throughout Southern California. The truck stop location where Jessica's car was found became a focus, with investigators questioning drivers and employees about suspicious activity on the night of October 15th. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. In March 1996, a trucker named Dale Morrison contacted the Riverside County Sheriff's Department with information about the night Jessica disappeared. Morrison had been delivering produce from Central California to distributors in Arizona and had stopped at the truck stop around 11:30 p.m. on October 15th to rest before continuing his journey. Morrison remembered the night clearly because he had witnessed an argument between a man and woman in the parking lot near where Jessica's car was later found. The woman appeared distressed and was trying to get away from the man, who kept grabbing her arm and steering her toward a dark-colored van. Morrison had considered intervening, but ultimately decided it was a domestic dispute that wasn't his business. "I regret that decision every day," Morrison told Detective Collins. "The girl looked young, maybe high school age, and she was scared. When I saw the news about the missing teenager, I realized I might have seen something important." Morrison's description of the man was detailed enough for police artists to create a composite sketch. White male, approximately 40 years old, medium height and build, wearing dark clothing and a baseball cap. The woman matched Jessica's general description, though Morrison had seen her only briefly and from a distance in poor lighting. The van Morrison described was significant because it suggested a level of planning that contradicted the theory of a random abduction. Someone had brought appropriate transportation for moving an unwilling victim, implying premeditation rather than an opportunistic crime. Detective Collins worked with the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit to develop a profile of Jessica's likely abductor. The profile suggested someone familiar with the area, possibly a local resident, rather than a transient carnival worker. The calculated disposal of evidence and the truck stop location indicated knowledge of local geography and traffic patterns. The investigation shifted focus to men in the Indio area with access to dark-colored vans and histories of inappropriate behavior toward teenage girls. This approach yielded dozens of potential suspects, but no solid leads. Many van owners had alibis for the night of October 15th, while others with suspicious backgrounds didn't match Morrison's physical description. In June 1996, 8 months after Jessica's disappearance, the case took an unexpected turn when human remains were discovered in a remote area of Joshua Tree National Park, approximately 50 miles northeast of Indio. The remains were found by rock climbers exploring a canyon that was rarely visited by tourists, in a location that would have required local knowledge to access. Initial examination suggested the remains were those of a young woman who had been dead for several months, consistent with Jessica's October disappearance. But positive identification would require dental records and other forensic analysis that could take weeks to complete. Maria Martinez provided Jessica's dental records from her longtime family dentist, Dr. Patricia Wong, who had been treating Jessica since childhood. The comparison should have been straightforward, but the results were confusing and ultimately devastating for the family. The remains found in Joshua Tree were definitely not Jessica Martinez. Dental comparison revealed significant differences in tooth structure and previous dental work. More puzzling was the medical examiner's estimate that the young woman had been dead for at least 2 years, possibly longer, meaning she had died well before Jessica's disappearance. The discovery launched a separate investigation into the identity of the Joshua Tree victim, eventually identified as 19-year-old Linda Chen, no relation to Jessica's friend Sarah, who had disappeared from Riverside in 1993. Linda's case had received minimal attention at the time because she was initially considered a runaway, a troubled teenager with a history of conflict with her parents and experimentation with drugs. Linda Chen's murder investigation revealed connections to a network of men who targeted young women throughout Southern California's desert regions, using isolated locations in Joshua Tree and the Mojave Desert to dispose of victims. But none of these suspects had any apparent connection to Jessica Martinez or the Riverside County Fair. Detective Collins found himself investigating 2 separate cases that had become entangled through geographical coincidence. The discovery of Linda Chen's remains had raised hopes for solving Jessica's disappearance, but ultimately led to another dead end while opening up an entirely different criminal investigation. As 1996 turned into 1997, Jessica Martinez remained missing without trace. The investigation had consumed thousands of hours and generated hundreds of leads, but no physical evidence of what happened to her after she left her friends to visit the restroom on October 15, 1995. The case officially went cold in 1998, though Detective Collins continued following up on tips and monitoring missing person databases for any trace of Jessica. He retired in 2003, passing the file to Detective Sandra Williams with a personal promise to keep searching for answers. In 2019, advances in DNA technology prompted the Riverside County Sheriff's Department to reopen several cold cases, including Jessica Martinez's disappearance. Detective Williams, now a 20-year veteran, submitted evidence from Jessica's car and purse for advanced DNA analysis that hadn't been available in 1995. The DNA testing revealed traces of an unknown male's genetic material on the interior door handle of Jessica's Honda Civic, evidence too degraded for analysis using 1990s technology, but sufficient for modern genetic genealogy techniques. The profile was submitted to commercial DNA databases used by ancestry research companies, seeking family matches that might lead to identification. In September 2024, the genetic genealogy search produced a potential match to a man named David Kellerman, whose distant relatives had submitted DNA samples to ancestry websites. Kellerman lived in Coachella Valley, approximately 20 miles from where Jessica disappeared, and owned a landscaping business that operated throughout Riverside County. Detective Williams's investigation into Kellerman revealed a pattern of behavior that aligned with the FBI profile developed in 1996. He was 47 years old in 1995, matching the age estimate from trucker Dale Morrison's description. He owned multiple work vehicles, including vans used for transporting landscaping equipment. Most significantly, his business records showed he had been working at properties near the fairgrounds in the weeks leading up to Jessica's disappearance. Kellerman had no prior arrests for violent crimes, but further investigation revealed a troubling history of complaints from female customers about inappropriate comments and unwanted advances. Several women had canceled his landscaping services after incidents where Kellerman had made them uncomfortable, though none had filed formal complaints with police. The case against Kellerman was circumstantial but compelling. His DNA was found in Jessica's car. He matched witness descriptions, and he had knowledge of the local area, consistent with the calculated disposal of evidence. But 29 years after Jessica's disappearance, building a prosecutable case presented significant challenges. Key witnesses had died or could no longer be located. Physical evidence had degraded beyond usefulness. Most problematically, Kellerman himself had died of lung cancer in 2018, taking any possibility of confession or additional evidence to his grave. Detective Williams was left with strong suspicions, but no means of achieving legal resolution. The DNA evidence strongly suggested Kellerman's involvement in Jessica's disappearance, but proving his guilt beyond reasonable doubt would be impossible without his cooperation or additional evidence that no longer existed. In December 2024, the Riverside County Sheriff's Department held a press conference to announce their findings in the Jessica Martinez case. While stopping short of declaring the case solved, they named David Kellerman as the primary suspect based on DNA evidence and circumstantial factors developed during the investigation. Maria Martinez, now 68 years old and in poor health, attended the press conference with mixed emotions. Learning her daughter's likely killer had been identified provided some closure, but Kellerman's death meant Jessica's case would never see trial or definitive resolution. "I always hoped we would find Jessica alive," Maria said, flanked by family members and victim advocates. "When that became impossible, I hoped we would at least find answers. Today we have some answers, but not the justice I dreamed about for 29 years." Jessica Martinez's body has never been found. Detective Williams believes Kellerman disposed of her remains in one of the many remote desert locations he would have known through his landscaping work, areas that may never be searched or developed. The vastness of Southern California's desert regions means Jessica may remain lost forever, despite investigators' knowledge of who likely killed her. The Riverside County Fair still operates every October, though security measures have been significantly enhanced since 1995. Jessica's disappearance prompted changes in lighting, camera coverage, and security protocols that have likely prevented similar incidents. But for the Martinez family, the fairgrounds remain a place of permanent grief, where their daughter's laughter was captured in photographs on the last night of her life. The case illustrates the evolution of forensic science over nearly 3 decades, from the limited DNA analysis capabilities of 1995 to the genetic genealogy techniques that finally identified a suspect in 2024. But it also demonstrates the limitations of even advanced technology when too much time has passed and too many witnesses have been lost to the decades between crime and resolution. David Kellerman took his secrets to the grave, leaving investigators with strong evidence of his guilt, but no confession, no additional victims identified, and no location where Jessica Martinez might finally be laid to rest beside her family. The photograph arrived in Detective Lieutenant Michael Brennan's mailbox on a Tuesday morning in November 2006, mixed among bills and junk mail at his modest ranch home in Deer Park, Long Island. Brennan had been with the Suffolk County Police Department for 18 years, the last 6 as head of the major case squad, and he was accustomed to receiving tips and correspondence related to ongoing investigations. But this envelope was different. No return address, postmarked locally, containing only a single 8E10 black and white photograph. The image showed a young woman, perhaps in her early 20s, bound to a chair in what appeared to be a basement or garage. Her eyes were wide with terror, duct tape covered her mouth, and bruises were visible on her arms and face. Written in red ink across the bottom of the photograph were the words, "She lasted 3 days. How long will the next one last?" Brennan's first instinct was that the photo might be a sick prank or perhaps a still from a horror movie, but something about the image's composition and the genuine terror in the woman's eyes convinced him otherwise. He immediately contacted the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit and the lab technicians at Suffolk County's forensic facility. Analysis of the photograph revealed several disturbing details. The image quality and paper suggested it had been taken with professional equipment and developed in a traditional darkroom rather than printed digitally. The timestamp visible on a clock in the background indicated the photo was taken on October 15, 2006, exactly 1 month before it arrived in Brennan's mail. More troubling was the forensic team's assessment that the photograph appeared genuine. The woman's restraints showed signs of struggle, the lighting and shadows were consistent throughout the image, and digital analysis found no evidence of manipulation or staging. The terror in the subject's face appeared authentic in ways that would be difficult for even a skilled actress to replicate. The FBI's behavioral analysts suggested the photograph represented a trophy taken by a serial killer, someone who derived pleasure not only from the act of murder, but from taunting law enforcement with evidence of his crimes. The decision to mail the photo to Brennan specifically, rather than to the media or the department in general, indicated research into the local police structure and possibly personal knowledge of Brennan's role and reputation. But despite the photograph's disturbing implications, investigators faced a fundamental problem. They had no missing person report that matched the woman in the image. Brennan's team compared the photo to every missing person case in Suffolk County dating back 5 years, then expanded their search to include Nassau County, New York City, and eventually the entire tri-state area. No one matching the victim's description had been reported missing. The investigation expanded to include unidentified remains found throughout Long Island, but again yielded no matches. The woman in the photograph appeared to be in her early 20s, with shoulder-length brown hair and a small scar visible on her left cheek. She was wearing what appeared to be a blue sweatshirt and jeans, casual clothing that provided few clues about her identity or background. Detective Sarah Kim, assigned to work with Brennan on the case, suggested the victim might have been someone living on the margins of society, a runaway, homeless person, or sex worker whose disappearance wouldn't necessarily trigger a missing person report. This theory led to investigations at homeless shelters, drug treatment centers, and areas known for prostitution, but produced no solid leads. The basement or garage shown in the photograph became another focus of investigation. Crime scene analysts identified several details that might help locate the scene. Concrete block walls with a distinctive pattern, overhead, fluorescent lighting, and what appeared to be automotive tools hanging on a pegboard in the background. The setting suggested a residential garage or basement workshop, possibly in a suburban area where such spaces were common. Suffolk County contains thousands of homes with basements and garages matching the general description, making a comprehensive search impractical without additional identifying features. Investigators focused on registered sex offenders and individuals with histories of violence against women, checking properties associated with potential suspects for matches to the photograph's background elements. The case took on increased urgency in January 2007, when Brennan received a second photograph. This image showed a different victim, a blonde woman, also young, bound in what appeared to be the same location as the first photograph. The timestamp indicated it was taken on December 20th, 2006, approximately 2 months after the first image. The red ink message read, "She lasted 4 days. I'm getting better at this." The second photograph confirmed investigators' worst fears. They were dealing with a serial killer who was documenting his crimes and appeared to be escalating. The location appeared identical to the first photo, suggesting the killer had a secure space where he could hold victims for extended periods without detection. Detective Kim coordinated with missing person units throughout the Northeast, but again found no reports matching the second victim. The pattern suggested the killer was specifically targeting women who wouldn't be immediately missed, a calculated approach that demonstrated planning and familiarity with how missing person investigations operated. FBI profiler Dr. Rachel Morrison developed a preliminary assessment of the suspect based on the 2 photographs and the method of communication with police. The killer was likely a white male between 30 and 50 years old, with sufficient income and stability to maintain the space shown in the photos. His decision to taunt police indicated narcissism and a belief that he was intellectually superior to law enforcement. The professional quality of the photographs suggested either formal training in photography or significant experience as a hobby. The darkroom development indicated access to traditional photo processing equipment, which was becoming increasingly rare as digital photography dominated the market. Dr. Morrison's profile also noted the killer's apparent enjoyment of the psychological game he was playing with investigators. The monthly timing of the photographs suggested a pattern, with the killer possibly taking victims on a regular schedule and then waiting precisely 1 month before revealing each crime. In February 2007, Brennan received the third photograph. This victim was Hispanic, appeared younger than the previous 2 women, and was shown in the same basement location. The timestamp was dated January 25, 2007, maintaining the monthly pattern. The message read, "She lasted 5 days. Practice makes perfect." The escalating duration suggested the killer was either developing more sophisticated methods of keeping victims alive or was simply enjoying the prolonged suffering. Either possibility indicated an extremely dangerous individual who was likely to continue killing unless stopped. The third photograph prompted Suffolk County to coordinate with the FBI's Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, VICAP, and expand the investigation to include behavioral analysts, geographic profilers, and technical specialists from Quantico. The case was designated a federal serial murder investigation, bringing additional resources, but also increased pressure for results. Geographic profiling suggested the killer likely lived or worked within a 20-mile radius of central Suffolk County, based on the local postmarks and his apparent familiarity with Detective Brennan's position and address. The analysis indicated someone with deep roots in the community, possibly employed in a profession that provided flexible scheduling and legitimate reasons to be absent for extended periods. The investigation took an unexpected turn in March 2007 when the fourth photograph failed to arrive on schedule. Brennan had been expecting another image around March 15th, based on the monthly pattern, but his mailbox contained only routine correspondence. Investigators initially hoped this might indicate the killer had been arrested for other crimes or had otherwise stopped his activities. But on March 28th, Brennan received an envelope containing not a photograph, but a handwritten letter. The message, written in the same red ink as the photo captions, was brief but chilling. Detective Brennan, the game is changing. No more photographs. You'll have to find them on your own now. But don't worry, I'm not stopping. I'm just getting more careful. Your move. The letter was processed for fingerprints, DNA evidence, and handwriting analysis, but yielded no useful forensic evidence. The paper was common office stationery, available at any office supply store, and the ink came from a standard red pen. The handwriting analysis suggested someone educated and right-handed, but provided no basis for identification. The cessation of photographs marked the beginning of a more traditional investigation phase, as detectives could no longer rely on the killer's own documentation of his crimes. The task force expanded their search for missing persons who might fit the killer's apparent victim profile, focusing on women aged 18 to 30, who had disappeared from the tri-state area since late 2006. This expanded search revealed several missing person cases that investigators had previously overlooked. Maria Santos, 19, had disappeared from Hempstead in December 2006 while walking home from her job at a convenience store. Jennifer Walsh, 23, had vanished from a Patchogue bar in February 2007. Ashley Williams, 20, had last been seen leaving her apartment in Bayshore in March 2007. None of these women matched the victims shown in the photographs, but the timing of their disappearances aligned with the killer's apparent monthly schedule. Detective Kim theorized that the photographed victims might have been early experiments or practice runs, while the women reported missing represented the killer's ongoing activities. The investigation into these missing women revealed a troubling pattern. All three had been alone when they disappeared. All had limited family support systems, and all had been involved in activities or circumstances that might delay the reporting of their disappearance. The killer appeared to be selecting victims based on their vulnerability and the likelihood that their absence wouldn't trigger immediate police attention. In September 2007, nearly 6 months after the last communication from the killer, construction workers discovered human remains buried in a wooded area near Gilgo Beach. The location was isolated, accessible by car, but not frequently visited by the public. Initial examination suggested the remains were those of a young woman who had been dead for several months. Forensic analysis identified the victim as Maria Santos, confirming investigators' fears that the missing women were connected to the photograph killer. Santos had been bound with rope and duct tape, consistent with the restraints shown in the photographs, though decomposition made it impossible to determine exact cause of death. The discovery of Santos's body prompted an intensive search of the Gilgo Beach area, resulting in the discovery of 3 additional sets of remains over the following weeks. The victims were identified as Jennifer Walsh, Ashley Williams, and a 4th woman, Melissa Cruz, who hadn't been reported missing but was identified through dental records. All 4 victims showed signs of prolonged captivity and restraint consistent with the killer's pattern of keeping victims alive for extended periods. The burial locations suggested someone familiar with the area's geography and the seasonal patterns of human activity around the beaches. The Gilgo Beach discoveries confirmed that the photograph killer had been active for months longer than his documented communications suggested, but also indicated that his methods had evolved beyond the basement workshop shown in the images. The killer was adapting his techniques while maintaining his core pattern of targeting vulnerable women. Detective Brennan retired in 2012, having worked the case for 6 years without achieving an arrest. His successor, Lieutenant James Rodriguez, inherited a massive case file but few promising leads. The killer had ceased all communication with police after his March 2007 letter, and no additional remains were discovered despite extensive searches throughout Suffolk County. The case remained active, but largely dormant until 2018, when advances in DNA analysis prompted Suffolk County to resubmit evidence collected from the burial sites. The improved testing methods revealed traces of the killer's genetic material that had been too degraded for analysis using earlier technology. The DNA profile was submitted to national databases and commercial ancestry websites used for genetic genealogy research. In October 2023, investigators received a potential match to a man named Robert Chen, no relation to Detective Kim, whose second cousin had submitted DNA samples to a genealogy website. Chen was a 52-year-old photographer who operated a studio in Hauppauge, approximately 10 miles from the Gilgo Beach burial sites. His business specialized in portrait photography and wedding documentation, skills that aligned with the professional quality of the images sent to Detective Brennan. More significantly, property records showed Chen owned a home with a basement workshop that closely resembled the location shown in the photographs. Surveillance of Chen revealed several behaviors consistent with the FBI's behavioral profile. He lived alone, maintained irregular work schedules that would accommodate extended absences, and drove a van suitable for transporting unwilling victims. His photography studio contained darkroom equipment for traditional film processing, explaining the method used to develop the photographs sent to police. On November 15, 2023, exactly 17 years after the first photograph arrived in Detective Brennan's mailbox, Suffolk County Police executed search warrants for Chen's home and business. In the basement of his residence, investigators found a workshop matching the background details from the 2006 photographs, including the distinctive concrete block walls and pegboard tool arrangement. More damning evidence was discovered in Chen's darkroom, where investigators found negatives and prints from additional photographs that had never been sent to police. These images documented at least 6 more victims, suggesting the killer's actual victim count was significantly higher than investigators had realized. Chen was arrested and charged with multiple counts of first-degree murder. During interrogation, he initially denied involvement, but eventually provided details about his crimes that hadn't been released to the public. He described the basement workshop as his gallery, where he could photograph his victims and preserve the memories of their terror. "I wanted to show Detective Brennan that he wasn't as smart as he thought," Chen told investigators. "Every month when I mailed those photographs, I was proving that I could commit perfect crimes right under his nose. The game only ended when I got bored with it." Chen's confession revealed the calculated nature of his victim selection process. He had specifically targeted women whose disappearances wouldn't trigger immediate intensive investigations, studying missing persons statistics and police response patterns to identify the most vulnerable demographics. The photographer pleaded guilty in March 2024 to avoid the death penalty, receiving multiple life sentences without possibility of parole. His confession helped investigators close 11 unsolved missing person cases dating back to 2005. Though Chen claimed his actual victim count was higher and refused to provide details about his earliest crimes. Michael Brennan, now 71 and long, retired from the Suffolk County Police Department, attended Chen's sentencing hearing. The detective who had been personally targeted by the killer spoke briefly to reporters outside the courthouse, reflecting on the case that had defined the final years of his career. For 17 years, I wondered if we would ever catch this monster, Brennan said. The families of these young women deserve justice, and I'm grateful they finally received it, even though it took far too long. The Chen case prompted changes in how Suffolk County handles missing person investigations, particularly for individuals who might not have strong family or social connections, to report their disappearance promptly. The killer's success in targeting vulnerable women led to improved coordination between missing person units and major case squads, ensuring that patterns might be identified more quickly in future investigations. Robert Chen remains incarcerated at Clinton Correctional Facility in upstate New York, where he continues to refuse cooperation with investigators seeking information about additional victims. The basement workshop where he photographed his victims has been sealed and will eventually be demolished. But the images he created continue to serve as evidence in ongoing efforts to identify any remaining victims from his 17-year killing spree. The case represents one of the longest-running serial murder investigations in Suffolk County history, spanning nearly 2 decades from the first photograph's arrival to Chen's eventual capture. The killer's decision to taunt police with evidence of his crimes ultimately led to his downfall, as the photographs provided crucial forensic evidence that connected him to multiple victims. When DNA technology finally advanced enough to process the degraded genetic material recovered from the burial sites. The call came into the Riverside County Sheriff's Department at 11:47 p.m. on September 23, 2019. A motorist traveling eastbound on Interstate 10 near the Whitewater Rest Area had spotted what appeared to be human remains scattered along the shoulder of the highway, approximately 30 yards from the roadway. Deputy Maria Santos arrived at the scene 20 minutes later, her patrol car's headlights illuminating the grisly discovery that would launch one of the most perplexing missing person cases in the department's history. The remains were those of a young woman, later determined to be in her early 20s, with distinctive tattoos, visible despite the advanced state of decomposition. A small rose tattoo adorned her left wrist, and a larger piece depicting a soaring eagle covered most of her right shoulder blade. Her clothing consisted of faded blue jeans, hiking boots, and a red flannel shirt that suggested someone accustomed to outdoor life or manual labor. More puzzling was the discovery of a handwritten sign approximately 50 feet from the body, apparently blown by desert winds, but still legible. Written in black marker on a piece of cardboard torn from a shipping box, the sign read, "Anywhere but here, please," in neat, careful lettering. The positioning and condition of the sign suggested it had been at the location for several weeks, possibly longer. Detective Lieutenant Frank Morrison, a 20-year veteran of the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, was assigned to lead the investigation. Morrison had worked dozens of highway fatalities and understood the particular challenges posed by Interstate 10, which stretched from California to Florida and carried transient populations that made victim identification difficult. The initial assumption was straightforward. A hitchhiker had been struck by a vehicle while attempting to flag down rides near the rest area. The remote location, poor lighting, and high-speed traffic created conditions where such accidents occurred with tragic regularity. The scattered remains and significant decomposition suggested the incident had occurred months earlier, during the intense summer heat that accelerated the process. But the autopsy conducted by Riverside County Coroner Dr. Patricia Kim revealed findings that complicated the vehicular accident theory. While the victim had suffered massive trauma consistent with being struck by a fast-moving vehicle, the pattern of injuries suggested impact had occurred while she was lying down rather than standing. Additionally, several fractures appeared to have been inflicted post-mortem, indicating the body had been moved or manipulated after death. More disturbing was Dr. Kim's discovery of defensive wounds on the victim's hands and forearms, suggesting she had fought an attacker before her death. The coroner's preliminary assessment indicated the woman had died from blunt force trauma to the head, likely from a weapon rather than vehicular impact, with the highway placement occurring after the fact to disguise the crime scene. Detective Morrison's team launched a comprehensive investigation to identify the victim. The tattoos provided the most promising lead, as both pieces appeared to be professional work that might be traceable to specific artists or shops. The rose design was relatively common, but the eagle tattoo showed distinctive artistic styling that suggested a skilled tattooist with a recognizable technique. Investigators canvassed tattoo parlors throughout Riverside County and surrounding areas, showing photographs of the tattoos to artists and shop owners. The effort consumed weeks of detective time, but yielded no immediate identification of either the artwork or the victim. The quality of the work suggested the tattoos had been done by established professionals rather than amateur or prison artists. But this only expanded the potential geographic scope of the investigation. The hitchhiker sign became another focus of investigation. Analysis of the cardboard revealed it had come from a box originally used to ship automotive parts, with partial shipping labels indicating distribution through a supply chain that served auto repair shops throughout Southern California. The marker used to write the message was a standard Sharpie brand pen available at any retail store. Handwriting analysis suggested the sign's creator was right-handed, had received at least a high school education, and was likely female based on the letter formations and overall presentation. The careful, deliberate lettering indicated someone not under immediate duress while creating the sign, suggesting it had been prepared in advance of hitchhiking rather than hastily made while already stranded. Detective Morrison coordinated with missing person units throughout California, Nevada, and Arizona to identify women matching the victim's description who had disappeared during the estimated time frame of late spring or early summer 2019. The search parameters included females aged 18-30, approximately 5'6" in height, with brown hair and the distinctive tattoos. This investigation revealed several potential matches, but none provided definitive identification. Sarah Mitchell, 22, had disappeared from a campground near Joshua Tree National Park in May 2019. Jessica Torres, 24, had last been seen leaving her apartment in 29 Palms in June 2019. Amanda Brooks, 21, had vanished while traveling from Phoenix to Los Angeles in July 2019. Each case presented complications that prevented easy resolution. Mitchell's family described her as an experienced hiker, unlikely to hitchhike on highways, preferring remote trails and off-road exploration. Torres had been involved in a contentious custody dispute that might have motivated her to disappear voluntarily. Brooks had a history of substance abuse and unstable relationships that complicated efforts to establish a reliable timeline of her activities. The investigation expanded to include truck stops, gas stations, and restaurants along the I-10 corridor where a hitchhiker might have been seen or remembered. Interstate 10 served as a major route for commercial trucking, and many drivers maintained regular schedules that created opportunities for witnesses to recall unusual incidents or passengers. This canvass produced several reported sightings of young women hitchhiking in the general area during the relevant time frame, but none could be definitively connected to the victim. Truck driver William Hayes reported picking up a woman matching the description near the Cabazon Dinosaurs roadside attraction in late June, but recalled dropping her off in Indio rather than the remote location where the body was found. Gas station clerk Maria Gonzalez remembered a young woman with visible tattoos asking about bus schedules at a Desert Center station in early July, but security camera footage from that period had been routinely deleted according to the company's data retention policy. Restaurant workers at various locations reported serving customers who might have been the victim, but none retained receipts or other documentation that could confirm the sightings. The investigation took an unexpected direction in February 2020 when Detective Morrison received a call from Dr. Angela Rodriguez, a forensic anthropologist at UC Riverside who had been consulted on the case. Dr. Rodriguez had been conducting additional analysis of the victim's remains and discovered evidence that significantly altered the investigation's timeline. Examination of bone density and dental development indicated the victim was younger than initially estimated, likely between 16 and 19 years old, rather than in her early 20s. This age adjustment prompted investigators to expand their search to include runaway reports and missing juvenile cases, opening new avenues of investigation, but also complicating jurisdictional issues. The revised age estimate also raised disturbing questions about the circumstances of the victim's death. A teenage hitchhiker would have been particularly vulnerable to predators, and the isolated location suggested someone familiar with the area's geography and traffic patterns. The perpetrator had chosen a location where the body might remain undiscovered for months, indicating planning and local knowledge. Detective Morrison's team revisited their geographic profiling, focusing on individuals who lived or worked in the immediate area and would have known about the remote location near the Whitewater Rest Area. This analysis identified several persons of interest, including maintenance workers, long-haul truckers with regular routes, and residents of nearby communities who might have used the area for illegal dumping or other activities. The COVID-19 pandemic in early 2020 severely impacted the investigation as travel restrictions limited investigators' ability to conduct in-person interviews and follow up on leads in other states. Many potential witnesses became difficult to locate as businesses closed and people relocated due to economic hardship. The case essentially went dormant for nearly a year as the Sheriff's Department focused resources on pandemic-related enforcement and public safety issues. When full investigation resumed in early 2021, Detective Morrison was nearing retirement, and the case was reassigned to Detective Sarah Chen, a recent transfer from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department with extensive experience in cold case investigations. Chen brought fresh perspective and new analytical techniques to the evidence that had been collected over the previous 18 months. Chen's first major decision was to resubmit all physical evidence for updated DNA analysis, using improved testing methods that had become available since the initial investigation. The victim's remains and personal items were processed using enhanced STR, short tandem repeat, analysis, and mitochondrial DNA testing that might yield results where previous testing had failed. The updated analysis produced a partial DNA profile that was submitted to the Combined DNA Index System, CODIS, and commercial genealogy databases used for genetic genealogy investigations. While no direct matches were found, the profile provided enough genetic information to begin building family trees that might lead to identification through relatives. In parallel with the genetic genealogy investigation, Detective Chen conducted a comprehensive review of the original case file, focusing particularly on the timeline and geographic elements that previous investigators had established. Her analysis revealed several overlooked details that suggested new investigative directions. The victim's clothing, while consistent with someone living an itinerant lifestyle, showed signs of recent washing and maintenance that indicated access to laundry facilities within days or weeks of her death. The hiking boots were relatively new and expensive, suggesting either recent purchase or gifts from someone with financial resources. These details painted a picture of someone who, despite hitchhiking, had not been living rough for an extended period. Detective Chen also noted that the location where the body was discovered, while remote, was visible from a service road used by Caltrans maintenance crews and utility workers. The perpetrator had taken significant risk in placing the body where it might be discovered by workers with regular access to the area. This suggested either poor planning or desperation to dispose of evidence quickly. The investigation took a major turn in September 2021, when genetic genealogy research identified a potential family connection. The victim's DNA profile showed strong genetic similarity to a family named Patterson that had extensive roots in Arizona and Southern California, dating back several generations. Contact with Patterson family members revealed that a teenage daughter, Rebecca Patterson, had run away from their home in Prescott, Arizona, in May 2019. Rebecca, who was 17 at the time of her disappearance, matched the physical description and age estimate of the I-10 victim. More significantly, her family confirmed that she had both the rose and eagle tattoos, having gotten them during a previous runaway episode when she had spent several months in Las Vegas. Rebecca's family described a troubled teenager who had struggled with drug use and mental health issues, leading to multiple runaway incidents since age 15. She had previously hitchhiked extensively throughout the Southwest, often disappearing for weeks or months before returning home or being located by authorities. Her parents had filed missing person reports with both Prescott Police and the Arizona Department of Public Safety, but Rebecca's history of voluntary disappearances had limited the urgency of the search efforts. The identification of Rebecca Patterson as the victim prompted a comprehensive investigation into her activities and contacts during the final months of her life. Detective Chen worked with Arizona authorities to trace Rebecca's movements from her disappearance in Prescott in May 2019 to her death near the Whitewater Rest Area sometime during the summer. This investigation revealed that Rebecca had been seen at various locations throughout Arizona and Southern California during late spring and early summer 2019. She had stayed at homeless shelters in Phoenix and Flagstaff, had been arrested for hitchhiking violations in Kingman, Arizona, and had been treated at a hospital emergency room in Barstow, California, for dehydration and minor injuries from a fall. The Barstow Hospital records, dated July 8, 2019, provided the closest documented sighting to Rebecca's estimated time of death and the location where her body was found. Emergency room staff remembered her as polite but evasive about her circumstances, declining social services assistance and leaving against medical advice after receiving IV fluids and basic treatment. Security footage from the Barstow Hospital showed Rebecca leaving the facility alone on foot, carrying a small backpack and walking toward the interstate access roads. This was the last confirmed sighting of her alive, placing her approximately 30 miles from where her body would eventually be discovered. The investigation into Rebecca's final days focused on identifying anyone who might have encountered her during the period between her hospital discharge and her death. Detective Chen coordinated with California Highway Patrol to review traffic incident reports, trucker logs, and surveillance footage from gas stations and truck stops along the I-10 corridor during the relevant time frame. This exhaustive review identified a significant lead in November 2021 when CHP officers located a trucker who remembered picking up a young woman matching Rebecca's description near Barstow in July 2019. Driver Michael Kowalski, operating under a lease agreement with a major shipping company, had maintained detailed logs that confirmed his presence in the area during the relevant time period. Kowalski told investigators that he had picked up the hitchhiker around 10 p.m. on July 8, 2019, approximately 2 hours after Rebecca's discharge from the Barstow Hospital. He described her as tired and hungry, offering to buy her dinner at a truck stop near the Whitewater Rest Area. According to Kowalski, the young woman had seemed nervous and had repeatedly asked about getting rides further east toward Arizona. The trucker's account provided crucial timeline information, but also raised disturbing questions about what had happened after he dropped Rebecca off at the truck stop. Kowalski claimed he had left her there around midnight on July 9, 2019, after buying her a meal and giving her $20 for bus fare. He had not seen her again and had no knowledge of what happened to her subsequently. Detective Chen's investigation of Kowalski revealed a clean driving record and no criminal history, but also uncovered financial problems and recent divorce proceedings that might have created stress or desperation. More concerning were interviews with other drivers who described Kowalski as increasingly erratic and prone to angry outbursts during the period around Rebecca's disappearance. The truck stop where Kowalski claimed to have left Rebecca became a focus of intensive investigation. The facility, located approximately 5 miles from where her body was found, served as a regular stopping point for commercial drivers and offered 24-hour food service, fuel, and parking. Security camera coverage was limited, and recordings from July 2019 had been routinely deleted according to the company's data retention policies. Interviews with truck stop employees who had worked during the relevant time period yielded conflicting information. Some staff members recalled seeing a young woman matching Rebecca's description, but details varied significantly and no one remembered specific interactions or could confirm whether she had left with anyone. The investigation's focus shifted to the geographic area between the truck stop and the location where Rebecca's body was discovered. This 5-mile stretch included several isolated side roads and utility access points where a crime could have occurred without immediate detection. The terrain was typical high desert, with sparse vegetation and few landmarks that might have attracted attention from passing motorists. Crime scene analysts conducted extensive searches of potential secondary locations, looking for physical evidence that might indicate where Rebecca had actually been killed. The original assessment that she had been moved after death suggested the perpetrator had transported her body to the highway location, possibly from a more secluded area where the murder had taken place. This search effort, conducted over several weeks in late 2021, eventually identified a dirt access road leading to a utility substation approximately 2 miles from where Rebecca's body was found. The location was isolated but accessible by vehicle, providing the privacy needed for a violent crime, while still allowing transportation of evidence to the highway disposal site. Ground-penetrating radar and metal detector searches of the area revealed buried personal items that were subsequently identified as belonging to Rebecca Patterson. The items included her backpack containing identification documents, personal photographs, and a journal with entries dating up to July 8, 2019, the same date as her hospital discharge in Barstow. The journal entries provided heartbreaking insight into Rebecca's final weeks of life. She had written extensively about her desire to return home to Arizona and her frustration with the difficulty of finding reliable transportation. The final entry, dated the day of her death, described accepting a ride from a nice trucker who had offered to help her get to Phoenix. More significantly, the journal included a detailed description of the trucker and his vehicle that matched Michael Kowalski and his distinctive red and white Freightliner. Rebecca had noted the truck's license plate number and had written that she felt safe with the driver because he had shown her family photos and talked about his own daughter. Armed with this evidence, Detective Chen obtained search warrants for Kowalski's truck, residence, and storage facilities. The searches, conducted in December 2021, revealed blood evidence in the truck's sleeper compartment that DNA analysis confirmed belonged to Rebecca Patterson. Additional forensic evidence included fibers matching Rebecca's clothing and her fingerprints on interior surfaces of the vehicle. Confronted with the physical evidence, Kowalski initially maintained his innocence, but eventually provided a partial confession during interrogation. He admitted that Rebecca had traveled with him longer than he had initially claimed, staying in his truck for several days as he completed delivery routes throughout Southern California. According to Kowalski's statement, Rebecca had become increasingly anxious about returning to Arizona and had threatened to report him to authorities for transporting a minor across state lines. Fearing arrest and the loss of his commercial driving license, Kowalski had attempted to force Rebecca to leave his truck at the isolated utility substation area. "She said she was going to tell the cops I kidnapped her," Kowalski told investigators. "I never touched her inappropriately or anything like that, but I knew no one would believe me. When she started screaming and hitting me, I just lost control. I never meant to hurt her." The confession revealed that Rebecca's death had resulted from Kowalski striking her with a tire iron during a struggle outside his truck. Panicked by what he had done, he had initially hidden her body in a storage compartment of the trailer, completing his delivery routes before returning to dispose of the remains along the highway where they would eventually be discovered. Kowalski's detailed statement allowed investigators to close several aspects of the case that had remained unexplained. The scattered condition of Rebecca's remains resulted from repeated handling and storage in the truck compartment over several days as Kowalski traveled his delivery routes. The defensive wounds on her hands and arms were consistent with her attempting to defend herself during the initial assault. Michael Kowalski was arrested on December 15, 2021, and charged with second-degree murder, kidnapping, and transportation of human remains. His trial began in September 2022, with Detective Chen serving as the primary witness for the prosecution's case against him. During the trial, prosecutors presented the comprehensive evidence that had been developed over more than 3 years of investigation. Rebecca's journal entries, the DNA evidence from Kowalski's truck, and his detailed confession provided a clear narrative of the events leading to her death. Kowalski's defense team argued that the killing had been unintentional, resulting from a struggle in which their client had acted in self-defense when Rebecca became violent. They portrayed Rebecca as unstable and potentially dangerous, citing her history of drug use and multiple runaway incidents. The prosecution countered by presenting Rebecca's journal entries and hospital records, which showed a teenager struggling with mental health issues, but actively trying to return home to her family. Witnesses testified about Rebecca's generally peaceful demeanor and her expressed desire to reconcile with her parents and get help for her problems. On October 27, 2022, the jury found Michael Kowalski guilty of second-degree murder and kidnapping, but acquitted him of the charge related to transportation of remains. The judge sentenced him to 25 years to life in prison, noting the particular vulnerability of the teenage victim and the defendant's efforts to conceal his crime. Rebecca Patterson's family attended the sentencing hearing, with her mother delivering a victim impact statement that brought many observers to tears. She described Rebecca as a troubled but loving daughter who had been working to overcome her problems and return home when her life was cut short. Rebecca made mistakes, but she didn't deserve to die alone and afraid on a roadside, her mother said. She was trying to come home to us, and this man took away any chance she had to get better and be the person we knew she could become. The case's resolution provided closure for Rebecca's family after more than 3 years of uncertainty about her fate. Detective Chen received commendation from the Riverside County Sheriff's Department for her persistent investigation and use of innovative forensic techniques that ultimately led to Kowalski's conviction. The Patterson case also prompted changes in how law enforcement agencies handle missing person reports involving teenage runaways. Rebecca's history of voluntary disappearances had initially limited the urgency of search efforts, but investigators recognized that chronic runaways face heightened risks and deserve comprehensive protection regardless of their past behavior. Michael Kowalski remains incarcerated at California State Prison, Los Angeles County, where he continues to maintain that Rebecca's death was accidental, despite his conviction for intentional murder. He has filed appeals challenging various aspects of his conviction, but these efforts have been unsuccessful as of early 2024. The stretch of Interstate 10, where Rebecca Patterson's body was found, has since been memorialized by her family, who placed a small roadside marker near the location where she was discovered. The memorial serves as a reminder of the dangers faced by hitchhikers and the importance of protecting vulnerable young people who may be traveling alone. Detective Sarah Chen retired from the Riverside County Sheriff's Department in 2023, citing the emotional toll of investigating crimes against children and young adults. The Patterson case was her final major investigation, and she has said that bringing justice for Rebecca and closure for her family represents the most meaningful work of her law enforcement career. The case continues to serve as a training example for investigators throughout Southern California, demonstrating the importance of persistence, innovative forensic techniques, and interagency cooperation in solving complex missing person cases. Rebecca Patterson's death was a tragedy, but the comprehensive investigation that followed helped ensure that her killer was held accountable and that other families might be spared similar ordeals.